Rolling out. Time to heave it deep. Throws it shy of the goal line, and that ball is tipped around. Wow! Caught! Oh, that's a touchdown! Wow!
To the Gingell. Out of the hold of Mesco. Good snap. Good hold. And the kick is blocked. Appalachian State has stunned the college football world. One of the greatest upsets in sports history.
Welcome to The Rock.
Welcome to the G5 Hive and our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today we'll be taking a look at the App State Mountaineers, who finished 5-6 last season, and we will be heading over to the Sun Belt to dig further into those Mountaineers. They wrapped up their 2025 spring practice with their spring game on April 12th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is the publisher for App State Mania. He is David Ware. David can be found on X at App State Mania. Welcome to the show, David.
Well, that's quite the dramatic introduction. Well more than I deserve, but it's great to be back with you guys this season.
We're happy to have you back for yet another round to go of these Worker Bee series. And for those who are just turning into the G5 Hive for the first time, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how long you've been covering App State football?
Yeah, sure. I'm an App State graduate, proud to be so. When I first went to school here, it was my intention, ideally speaking, to be a sports writer. I think as I got more into my academic career and understanding a little more about futures, I learned that I was more of a capitalist than a journalist. So I ended up working in Fortune 300 America for about 25 years for a really great company. But as I got a little bit later into that career, I knew I'd want to have some things to occupy me as that part of my career wound down, so to speak. So I wanted to get back into the sports writing. I launched the original version of this site in 2014, which was App State's first season in FBS and in the Sun Belt Conference. So I am coming up on 2025 would be my 12th set of seasons covering App State athletics.
Well, moving over to the App State football team, they've hired Dow Logans as their new head coach. He had spent 2021 and 2022 as a tight end coach at Arkansas, and in 2023 and 2024, he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at South Carolina. What can you tell us about Coach Logans and what he brings to the table for the Mountaineers?
Yeah, well, I mean, in addition to his more recent resume, which is certainly college-driven, SEC-driven, he had a lengthy career, like pushing 20 years in the NFL. Offensive side of the ball, was a play caller at that level, so brings a lot of very varied knowledge and interest to the job. I would say that the thing I've noticed about Dow as he's been here is that he doesn't take a standard approach to this. The construction of his coaching staff, the people he's brought in around him, some of the roles that he's implemented, if you line them up against what we would all probably recognize as traditional coaching staffs and support staffs, it wouldn't look the same. There would be some places where it doesn't match up. And I think everyone's looking for an edge. There's nothing wrong with doing it differently. At the end of the day, it's all going to be in the results. You're either winning or you're not. But he has taken some interesting approaches to the kind of personnel that he's brought in, some people that he's known for a long time, some people that have played a mentoring role to him. He keeps a lot of those types of people close to him. So, it's been interesting to watch them construct the infrastructure of what App State football will be. And I think, I'm certainly still learning, what that means and how that's going to manifest itself going forward.
Well, as it often happens when you get a new head coach, that means new assistants, new coordinators. App State's no different in that regard, except for their head coach will also be calling plays. You touched on his extensive coaching on the offensive side of the ball. Can you describe the type of offense that Coach Loggins plans to run here at App State?
Well, I wish I could. If I could, I would. But I think we're still a little bit too early into that, which might seem surprising after several months. But I'm going to give Dal some credit. He's been very transparent since he's gotten here. Anytime I've spoken with him, he's been honest enough to say, "Look, he could run any of 10 different offensive schemes if he wanted to. He's probably seen them all at this point. What he's really trying to do right now is understand who his personnel is, what they're capable of, positionally, individually, collectively, and that's going to dictate for him what he feels comfortable that he can run capably." So I think they're still in that process. You went through a significant amount of turnover with the program. This is really the first time this has happened at App State, even with the portal being in existence now for several seasons. But you've had 36 total players leave the program since December, and if I take the spring portal, the December portal window, and the freshman class that's coming in for 2025, you're talking about more than 50 new players entering this program. Some of them have on-field history. Some of them don't. Some of them came from the Loggins background. There's several players from South Carolina and Arkansas, which you mentioned, but there are a lot of them that didn't come through either of those channels. So step one, and he's been, again, very honest about this from the beginning, has been, I'm just trying to learn the personnel and what they're good at. And once we figure that out, then we'll start crafting a game plan to meet that. But with 20 new players entering the program through the spring portal window, that process starts over again now. They're going to be doing this throughout the summer in OTAs, and they'll go into August camp, and I expect all the notes I've taken and all the speculative depth charts that I drew up during spring, I'll have to tear up and probably start over again. So I will do my best to walk you guys through what I think his instincts are and some of what I saw in spring ball, but I wouldn't rely on it being the future projection, just because I think he is taking the right approach to this, which is I'm not gonna paint myself into a corner offensively or defensively until I understand what the guys I'm asking to do the work are capable of doing.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. Despite throwing for nearly 3,000 yards and 23 touchdowns and adding another 336 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground, it almost seems, last year with Joey Aguilar, maybe expectations weren't met, and maybe that's the whole team in general. But Joey has made headlines more recently. He went to UCLA, now he's off to Tennessee. But let's focus on what App State has in this room. Billy Wiles returns, and the staff brought in A.J. Swan from LSU and J.J. Cole from Iowa State. Fun fact, J.J. Cole graduated from the same high school as my co-host, Luke.
One's a Hawk, always a Hawk.
But what should we make of this quarterback room kind of heading into fall camp here in 2025?
Well, again, I'll credit Dal. He's pretty transparent about it. I asked him point blank, just based on what I've seen in spring ball, is there a depth chart? Is there somebody who's sitting at number one? He loudly and clearly said, no, this is a competition that will continue forward. I would say based on my observations, I think that's fair. I don't think anybody took themselves out of the competition, but I don't know that anybody separated in the competition either. Truth be told, I think A.J. Swan, who you mentioned, comes in with the most on-field experience, probably the better credentials of the group. I would say if you ask me to handicap it, if I had to put my own money on it, yeah, I would have put him at number one. I don't know that I'm positive that's where we'll end up in the fall, but certainly he is going to be right there and factoring into the decision making that goes forward. But J.J. Cole did some good things. Had probably, I would say, arguably the best spring game of the quarterback group. And Billy Wiles is a guy that has been I'd say several different places where he's picked up a lot of skills that benefit him here. But he's also learning a new system, and that's the one thing that it doesn't matter who you are, where you came from, unless you were in Dal Loggins' system at South Carolina, you don't know what he's running or what he's trying to run. Everybody starts on even ground because nobody has been active in this system prior to Dal arriving here. So, everyone starts in the same place, which, I think is beneficial probably to everybody, in some regards because it really evens the competition.
For those not familiar with A.J. Swan, how would you describe his playing style?
I think the thing that struck me about AJ, just watching him throughout spring, was his decision-making prowess. He's very fast to see what's happening in front of him. He's good at pre-snaps, picking up his reads, watching what the defense is doing. And when the game gets sped up, he's able to stay on that pace no matter how fast it is. In fact, the place where I saw him be the most effective was in red zone drills. And, that when the field gets condensed and the defense has less to worry about in terms of space to cover, that's when you really see a quarterback's decision-making speed show up. And it can either really help you or really cut you down. Now, I would say that was where his strength was in the spring game as well. He was not as great between the 20s, didn't have as much success in moving the offense. But once they got into red zone drills, he led 2 very quick touchdown drives there. So, his ability to identify and then interpret what needs to happen when he gets to the line of scrimmage would definitely be where I think he stands out amongst the other guys in the room.
What do you think maybe the strengths of JJ and Billy bring to the table that could help them win the job?
JJ's interesting. He's just he is such an imposing physical guy. At 6'6". He's got a good arm. He is pretty sound with his decision making. One of the things I like about him is I wouldn't necessarily call him a running quarterback, but he's really good at moving laterally in the pocket and buying himself some time. He can feel the pressure. So, he's good at a variety of things. There's nothing about his game that necessarily, I think, elevates him past anyone else. But again, in the spring game, he had the most consistent success in moving the offense and seeing the things they wanted him to see. As with any young guy, I mean, we were talking about him before we came on the air. He's only in his second season. I mean, there's still a lot of upside there and a lot of things he needs to learn. But, there's a lot of physical, raw talent there that can kind of carry him in the meantime. So I was impressed with the way he was able to take the offense, move it beyond the sticks. And one of the things he did especially well that came up to me was he didn't have to worry about third down conversions because he was picking up first downs before he got to third down. And that's one of the underrated things about a quarterback is, I don't care if I care about you converting third downs, but I'm really more interested in seeing how many times do you face third down. If you're staying out of it, then you don't have to worry about turning the sticks over. And he did a really good job of that day. As far as Billy goes, having watched him for a couple of years now, Billy's a good all-around quarterback in terms of running with the ball. I'd put him ahead of the rest of the group. When he gets beyond the line of scrimmage, and he's pretty decisive about going when he decides to go, he can get up and move. And that's one of his strengths. Billy can make all the throws. I think he understands what he's seeing very well. He's been doing this a long time. He should be able to interpret this. I felt kind of badly for him because, when you get into a spring game type of an environment, you're a little bit subject to the way your offensive unit performs when you go out there with them. So, if you go out on that first snap and there's a holding call, now you're behind the sticks, and that can influence how long you're on the field and what you can do with the ball afterwards. So, I felt like maybe his reps weren't as even with the rest of them, but, that's just the way a spring game goes. And, it wasn't the spring game's not going to decide which one of these guys is 1, 2, or 3. It's just an indicator under that environment. So, I think they all bring something to it that's a little unique, that's their own. The biggest key to this is going to be who can consistently move that offense. I would say this, based on my observations today, if you're looking for a quarterback that's going to just, drag the offense behind and put them on his shoulders and take them somewhere, I don't know that I've seen that yet. Some of that may just be the familiarity with the offense or the way the plays are being called. Again, Dow was pretty honest. He put in the base offense during spring ball, and it's not like he went, 12 chapters deep into it. I just want to see if you guys can do the basic stuff before I start trying to make it complex. So, you may see more of that as it develops, but I think the quarterbacks are going to need the consistency and the productivity of the guys around them to be successful.
We'll talk about the offensive line here in a little bit, but from outsiders' perspective, it looks like offensive line could possibly be a concern. If that is a concern, do you think like the different skill sets might lead to who the starting quarterback is? In other words, like they're worried about, the offensive line holding up. Maybe they go to a more mobile option as the starter.
Well, I think the mobility of the quarterback room here is good. I wouldn't call anybody a dual threat. This is not Dow Loggins with Lenora Sellers behind center. That is not what we are or where we are here, which is fine. I don't know that anyone in the country is where Lenora Sellers is in terms of being a dual threat. But, I would go back, I think, to what I mentioned about A.J. Swan. Mobility is one way to deal with, hey, we don't have an endless amount of time in the pocket from a pass pro perspective. We need to be able to make sure that we're moving the ball forward. AJ's decision making is one of those things that can even the balance there a little bit. And I think that's a lot of what Dow's offense is naturally. You ask me, what does he want to do? I think in an ideal world, you'd see layered route combinations, a lot of crossing stuff. They'll motion into a lot of their patterns. And he's going to give his quarterback a lot of different choices to make, but they're choices that can get rid of the ball quickly. And I think that they're going to want to do that. And I think, if anything puts AJ maybe a little bit in the post position, it is his ability to see it and get rid of it before the trouble comes to him. And, that's another way besides mobility to deal with an aggressive pass rush.
If you think we get to the fall and they're still trying to find their quarterback between these options, is there a certain point in the schedule where you think it's kind of make or break, or?
Just knowing what the schedule is, it's kind of make or break right up front. We've got an opening game against Charlotte, which is a regional rivalry here in Carolina Panther Stadium. So that's going to be a big stage. You've got a non-D1 game the next week. And then weeks 3 and 4 are go to Boise State and play, which, is an epic matchup no matter where or when it happens. But then you have to turn around, fly back cross country, and Oregon State is coming to Boone week 4. So it's not like you've got a lot of slack in the rope. I think you're going to want to know what you want to do, who you want to be the guy week 1, and you need to be able to move with him. Now, does that mean they won't change? Of course not. If the world is not spinning the way they need it to, they're going to make a change. Sure. But I think ideally you'd like to go into that first game knowing exactly what you want to do and exactly what you'd like to be, because here's the thing. Again, you've got 50 new players entering this program, more than that actually. It's going to be a week-to-week thing. You're going to have to re-gauge this team every single week. And not that you don't do that everywhere, but I think you could see more drastic movement here because you've got a largely new team with a largely new coaching staff. All of that has to come together. So, where you're starting from, what your baseline is, and how quickly you can improve from week to week is going to be, I think, very visible here. And it's also going to be very important because, again, 3 of the first 4 weeks here are going to be pretty testy.
And there was another game in there, too, that I think will be interesting is they got to head – after Linderwood, they've got to head to Southern Miss, which is almost like Marshall over there now. So that'll be then going over to Boise State, and then you said Oregon State. So that's a tough stretch there.
Yeah, I mean, it's there is no easy ball in the Sun Belt, especially on the eastern side. And now you've taken part of the East with Charles Huff going over to Southern Miss. And we're very familiar with him. He's very familiar with us, at least what App has been. And that is part of what I think one of the things that is to Dow's advantage is, he's going to be able to take a system that nobody's really positive of. You can go watch the South Carolina film from last year. It's not going to be what you see out of App State. We just don't have that personnel grouping. So, he does have maybe a little bit of a surprise factor available to him. But again, I'm going to go back to what he said, and I think this is true. Until they figure out what they're capable of doing well, they're still trying to figure it out as well.
Well, let's move over to the running game, and there are several new faces in 2025. The Mountaineers' leading rusher, Amani Marshall, has graduated, along with Mikael Haywood. Hometown guy, Anderson Castle's now off to Duke. That leaves Kanye Roberts and Jalen Calhoun as the only returning backs who took snaps for the Mountaineers in 2024. David, we are looking to replace 228 rushing attempts, 1,110 yards, and 9 touchdowns. How did the staff go about replacing the depth in this room?
Well, I think they went about replacing it really twofold. One, there are running backs here. You mentioned Jalen Calhoun. Jalen's a younger guy, has had some injury challenges over time, but, very talented, a lot of speed, maybe the top end speed guy in that room. You also had some younger guys that were here. Kamani Alexander was a true freshman last season. He's in the mix there as well. And then they went into the portal. Rashad Dubinion came from Arkansas. Again, obviously, Dow would have been familiar with him from his time in Fayetteville. Khalifa Keith is a highly regarded running back out of high school that was at Tennessee and didn't see a lot of time on the field in Knoxville, but is over here now, brings his own distinct running style to the room. I would say that's going to be the way you're going to see that competition blend together is guys that were here, guys that are new. And we saw that during spring. I mean, that's one of the things I will say during spring is everybody got a lot of reps. If you're going to make the depth chart, if you're not going to make the depth chart, you can say what you want about it. It's not because you didn't get the chance to be on the field. Everybody got reps, and I got a good opportunity to get I would say a reasonable review of what everyone's skill set is. The tough thing about spring ball with running backs is, there are only a handful of practices sprinkled throughout the system or throughout the schedule that are full contact, where you're taking guys to the ground. You just don't see it very often. And, the two areas I would say, the running game offensively, and then your run defense, especially at the line of scrimmage, are really hard to gauge in spring because you're just not seeing full contact ball. So, I saw some things I liked, but until it's helmet on helmet, there's always a little bit of guesswork that goes into it.
Well, you said you saw some things that you liked, and you kind of have maybe an idea of maybe some situations that guys could excel at. Can you break down what you saw? Maybe a third down specialist, goal line, short guy. What'd you see?
I think it probably starts with if I were trying to guesstimate what I think Dow would like to do with his play calling offensively, I feel like he maybe tends to lean towards inside zone running a little bit more as a preference. And, different guys have different skill sets there. I would compare Dubinion and Kanye Roberts somewhat comparably physically and kind of their running styles, both capable of kind of seeing things and then making that quick first cut and then getting north and south as quickly as they can. I call them one-cut runners. As far as first down, third down, either one of them is capable of playing in any certain situation you've got. Khalifa Keith is interesting just because physically he's a bigger, broader guy, can run with a little more power, but I don't think that's all there is to his game. I don't think you're going to see him limited to being a short yardage guy. I did see him work very effectively in the red zone. I think he sees things down there really well, and he does have enough power to drag you. So I think situationally he may be the best pass catching option out of the backfield. I certainly saw them use him quite a bit, just swinging him out, and he seems comfortable with that. So, I would say he looks different than the other guys, but don't try to box him into just being third down or a short yardage guy. I think he's capable of playing between the 20s as well. One of the guys that I really enjoyed watching during spring was a true freshman named Jakari Lewis. Came from the Miami area, was signed in the December signing group. And he was a guy on film that I noticed was really, really comfortable running inside lanes. And he did so very well in high school. And he came here and he showed the same capacity. He sees things really quickly. His brain tells his feet what to do, and they do it. And I was really impressed with his ability to come in and run at a level that was almost as good as some of the veterans who were there.
Well, you got Charlotte first game. I think that's a Friday night. You said Panther Stadium should be electric for that first week. Which running back do you think gets the first carry?
Well, I guess I would say this. I don't anticipate that it really matters. I don't, you guys had kind of in the notes you sent over to ask, do I think someone's going to be the workhorse here? No, I don't. I think it's going to be a committee approach. I think if you want to be the workhorse in a college football offense as a running back today, you have to be able to do everything. And doing everything includes being able to get on top of a defense and separate from pursuit. And I don't know that I see that as readily in this group. I think there are a lot of guys who can all carry the ball capably. And I think, just the demands physically mean you need to have everybody in there. So, I think it's going to be pretty evenly split carries unless somebody just has a really hot hand one day. If I had to put the money down on it, I'd probably handicap it as Dubinion to start. But, I could very quickly see any of the rest of these guys working their way in second, third set of downs.
Well, like the running back room, this wide receiving core will look a bit different here in 2025 as well. The Mountaineers lose 5 of their top 6 receivers from a year ago, none bigger than first-team all-conference and friend of the podcast, Caden Robinson. Unfortunately for Caden and Mountaineers fans, he had the worst touchdown luck in 2024. He transferred to UCLA with a Pavia ruling, but then the NCAA denied his waiver for another season, and he's, I guess, fighting that case now, and we wish him all the best. Another loss is to former FCS All-American Mekhi Jackson off to Indiana. This rumor will look to replace 208 targets, 2,011 yards, and 8 touchdowns. It's highlighted by the return of Dalton Stroman, who averaged 30 yards per game and was tied for the team lead in touchdown receptions with 5. Did anyone kind of stand out or step up to bolster this room in the spring?
I don't know that anybody, necessarily separated themselves in my mind. You saw some really good skill sets from some of the new guys who were here. And again, there was a lot going on. When you're running offense, defense on both ends of the field, there's a lot to try to keep up with in spring ball. I spent a lot of time hoofing it up and down the sideline trying to make sure I saw a little bit of everybody. But, I would say that some of the new guys that came in who are going to factor into it without question, Davion Dozier came from Arkansas, again, a guy that Dow Loggins would have been familiar with, brings a different type of physical type there, very long, great catch radius. He was very active, and I would have put him easily within my first group projection. Suffered an injury later in spring camp. I don't think it's anything massive. It's the kind of an injury I would expect him to be cleared and ready to go probably around July. So, it's a temporary thing. It did take him out of the spring game. So, with absence of one player comes opportunity for another. Certainly in the slot, Jaden Barnes, who came in from Austin Peay and had a good track record there, showed some moments. He's very explosive. And I will say that the Loggins offense is really friendly to the slot. All right. Those guys, they have a lot of room to operate. And if you're in man coverage against them, the guy who's in that cover situation often has to run, dead sprint for 12 to 15 yards, just chasing the route. And then if the receiver catches it and has a corner he can turn on you, now you're really in trouble. So somebody like Jaden that has that route quickness is going to be very good there. Another guy who was really good is a redshirt freshman who was already here at App named Jose Leon. And Jose is also a slot guy who terrorized the first team defense last year as a scout team guy. That's where you earn a lot of respect from the veterans, is by going in on scout team every day and making people work. And he was really good at doing that last season. And Jose came back in the spring and was just very difficult to stay on top of. I'm really excited to see him and see what he's able to do. I think those two guys bring a lot to the party. You mentioned Dalton Stroman, and Dalton is a guy who's just a straight up vertical threat. Really big body, gives you an opportunity for 50-50 balls. good at a back shoulder throw, those kinds of things. There are weapons there. There's no doubt about it. I can see the opportunities that exist within that receiver group. Of course, the key to it is most of them are new or in new roles. Most of the quarterback room is new, and they're all learning a new scheme. So, you would see, there were days you would see the chemistry maybe starting to take hold in certain regards. And then there were some days when it just, it wasn't connecting. And that's going to continue. They need reps. They're going to have to go through OTAs. They're going to have to build that familiarity. They're going to have to build some confidence with one another. And that's really one of the biggest, probably coaching challenges of the offseason is, here's what we're trying to do, but they've also got to create some connection between these skill players. If the confidence isn't there, it's tough to overcome that. And I think you're going to see that continue as we go forward. But, the ability is there. It's just a matter of making those connections.
Well, it certainly sounds like there's no lack of talent and a lot of weapons in this room. But if you had to pick one guy to kind of have the biggest impact in 2025, who would that be?
Boy, that's, it's tough because I don't think this season is going to be a season of, superstar. I think there are players that are going to be important. I'll give you an example. This is about as tangibly as I can put it. In the spring game, most of the damage that was done in the passing game came from receivers inside the hashes. The slots were very effective. They used the tight ends well. Those guys racked up some numbers. To be honest with you, the outside receivers were, relatively speaking, kind of quiet. There was a touchdown throw in that group, but that was an area where you feel like, okay, coming out of spring, we need to make sure that those outside guys are connected and a consistent part of this offense. Otherwise, we can't stretch the field. And stretching the field is a big part of this Logan scheme. I mean, he's going to run you from 52 yards across, and you're going to have to try to figure out a way to eat that space. But in order for that to be effective week in and week out, you've got to have outside receivers that are a consistent threat. I think that's one of the opportunities that exists with this room. Certainly those guys in the slot that I mentioned, Jose Leon and Jaden Barnes, I think are going to factor into that. They can be catalysts for it. But I think I would have to say I'm still looking to see, and I'm not going to put it all on a receiver, all on a quarterback. It's a group effort. I've got to see more consistency from quarterback to those outside targets before I'm going to feel comfortable with it.
Well, with the coaching change, what have you been able to glean on how they want to use the tight ends in this offense? You talked about spreading them out. Is that a chance to get some guys in the seam or drag routes? What did you notice this spring?
A little bit of everything. They'll run some tight set stuff. Just, they'll bring in some regular looking 11, 12 personnel, put them right there in an H-back spot or up on the line. But they'll also pop them outside. And, part of that in spreading the field out is alternating the way you've got guys lined up. Hey, I'm going to see if I spread the tight end all the way out wide. Well, now the corner is occupied over there, and now I've got the slot either with a linebacker or safety or maybe a nickel cover guy inside. So, they're trying to create mismatches out of alignments just like anyone else would. But, I do think you'll see the tight ends active in the passing game. Historically, I think App State has typically used them more in certain kinds of packages, certain kind of situations, call it a boot roll or something like that, where you're faking the play action, coming back the other way, and your guys dragging off, maybe blocks down for a second and then a late release. I think there will be some more straight up the field vertical stuff for the tight ends in this offense. It's just going to be a matter, I think, of, kind of down distance situationally. Where are you in the game? Where are you on the field? But I think there are certainly opportunities for those guys to mix into the passing game even more vertically than maybe I've seen in the past.
Well, App State fans have grown accustomed to seeing Eli Wilson grabbing touchdowns on Saturdays, but he's graduated. Who in this tight end room should we have our eyes out for in 2025?
Well, this was probably coming into spring ball. This was probably the most established position group on the team in terms of depth from one end to the other. Now, some of that has changed. There was a tight end, one of the younger tight ends who did enter the portal and is now out of there. And as such, you've seen the team went out in spring ball and brought in a couple of tight ends to backfill that space. The two names that are most familiar to App State fans will be David Larkins, who is in his 6th year with the program. David's a big guy, comes from Cincinnati, has done, he's done it the right way. He came in here as a freshman, did his scout team duty. He's done the special teams thing. He's battled through some injuries, and now he's the guy in that room. He's unquestionably the leader. And he got paid off for that. He called a 75-yard touchdown pass in the spring game. So, it was good to see him be able to be rewarded for his commitment to the program. Kanan Hamlet is an Alabama guy that we signed out of high school as well, has developed here over time. And Kanan probably brings, a little more athleticism to it. You're talking about drag routes and those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things he can run. And, again, if you don't keep the right leverage on him from a coverage perspective, he turns the corner on you, now you're chasing. And he's a very capable blocker, tough kid. Has, like I said, has grown up here kind of the right way. Then you've got a couple of transfers who are coming in that aren't yet on campus. So I really can't offer a lot on them at this point because I haven't seen them in the system, but they do have tangible playing experience coming from their previous destinations.
Well, as I mentioned earlier, from an outsider's perspective, looking at this offensive line, it makes me a little bit nervous. But we'll get your thoughts on it. 5 guys are transferred out. There's only 20 games of FBS experience in this room. It is anchored by right guard Jaden Ramsey and left guard Griffin Scroggs. What were you able to learn about this unit here in the spring?
Well, it was an interesting spring, and one of the things that makes it even more challenging is starting left tackle Markel Samuel would have been projected as our starting left tackle and the most experienced guy in the room. Actually entered the portal late in spring ball. He went through most of spring practice, and the last week he decided he was going to go to the transfer portal. He's now at Oklahoma State, and that's kind of that. So right guard Jaden Ramsey actually played left tackle in the spring game. You had some transfer guys that have moved into a couple of those spots with, and I would say the offensive line, they mixed and matched a lot of position groups throughout spring camp. The offensive line was the one that kind of formed maybe the earliest, that I saw the quickest version of that. I guess the one thing I would say at this point is you got to figure out what you're doing at left tackle, because, I understood Markel. He had been a career guy here as well, so I knew him. We'll have to see how they're going to backfill that spot. I really feel like Ramsey is probably better inside. I think that's where he's most comfortable and most effective, but we'll see what happens, as they move through OTAs and then into August. There's just offensive line is unique. And not that there doesn't have to be continuity and chemistry among both sides of the ball, everybody playing, but your offensive line group is a little bit like ballet. Everybody's got to be moving in the same direction. Everyone's got to understand where everyone else is going to be, and there's got to be a huge amount of trust there. And I think that's the biggest thing I see for this offseason is making sure that you're building that continuity and that there's trust there, because you're talking about really huge guys working in a really small space, at least relatively speaking. And that was the one thing that I felt like I saw was there just wasn't, everyone individually was executing their job from snap to snap, but I'm not sure that I saw that continuity that you're going to need to have. And it showed up in the running game. I felt like the run game struggled in the spring game. From a pass pro perspective, it's just a matter of communication. So I think that's going to be probably one of the bigger ongoing challenges, is making sure that group is all pretty symbiotic in the way that they're approaching it and thinking about it and talking with one another at the line of scrimmage. Again, you've got guys that came in with good credentials, great recruiting credentials that came from big programs in some cases. But how that translates once I have to start depending on the guy to my left and my right, everything can change. So I hate to keep banging the same drum, but there's just a lot that's still up in the air as they move into summer workouts.
Well, David, if you had to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season with this information that you have today, early or mid-May, who'd you pick?
Well, I think it's tough. Because I'm going to tell you, I think the most important thing for this entire team, and we'll get to this at the end, is unity. They're going to do it together. Again, I don't think there's a Superman getting ready to walk out of the telephone booth and save the day. I think it's absolutely vital, though, and it's offense, so we might as well go here, that the quarterback position performs well. All right. And, whether that's a breakout season or not, I don't even know if it needs to be breakout. I think it needs to be consistent. It needs to be reliable. And that voice, because you've got new guys playing with new guys here, that voice needs to earn the respect of the guys in that huddle. They need to be able to follow him without question and confidently. So I would say it's important that the quarterback position perform well. Again, I don't want to put breakout pressure on them because I don't think it needs to be, otherworldly for the team to succeed. But it needs to be something that is reliable from snap to snap. So that's a little bit of a cop out relative to the question you asked me, but that's my honest answer at this moment.
Well, let's move over to the defensive side of the ball. And similar to the offense, we'll see a new coordinator here for the Mountaineers. DJ Smith joins the team. He was previously at App State as an outside linebackers coach, the senior defensive analyst, and director of recruiting relations from 2016 to 2019. 2020 to 2021, he was a linebackers coach at Missouri. In 2022 through 2024, he was the co-defensive coordinator, recruiting coordinator, and linebackers coach for Missouri. Can you kind of describe what you think he wants to do here at App State with this defense?
Well, and I'll add to that. DJ Smith is a playing legend here at App State. Was an All-American, a champion here. Played several seasons in the NFL. So DJ's history here with this fan base goes back for a couple of decades almost here. So certainly a very recognizable name. I think DJ, he wants to come in. We had been running here and were running that season that he was here with us, a 3-4 scheme. He's going to go to a 4-man front. You mentioned more of a 4-2. He ran a 4-2-5 when he was at Missouri with everyone's got a different name for him. It's this hybrid kind of in between quasi-nickel, quasi-safety, quasi-linebacker, depending on what the personnel is on the field. They call him a star here. So we'll go with the star terminology. I think, again, just my observation of watching this defense during spring camp and during the spring game, DJ's instincts are to always apply pressure. And he wants to do that right up at the front of the line of scrimmage. He wants to be in the backfield. He wants you having to react to them splitting gaps and sending blitz pressure. I think in an ideal world, he'd probably run man coverage 35-40% of the time. Certainly, if he can feel confident in doing that, he wants to make the offense uncomfortable with some of the ways that they're handling things up front, especially. So, I think he's going to be aggressive in the way he calls it. But again, I think he's in the same scenario that I mentioned with Dow earlier offensively, and that he's learning what these guys can do. Now, I will say that defensively, it's different on offense. There is certainly some historic App State presence there from returning players. There's a little more on defense, or at least there has been. Now, again, we went out and brought in 20 guys through the spring portal. So everything, the competition is going to start all over again. But in terms of what I saw lining up first team out in terms of the spring game, there's a lot of existing App State presence with that group. So we'll see how that transpires over the course of the summer.
Well, David, you said he wants to create a lot of pressure. So let's dig into the position room and start with the guys up front along that defensive line. This group only returns 3 guys who saw over 100 snaps in 2024, and this group sees 6 guys leave via the graduation or the portal. The biggest loss has to be first-team all-conference lineman Santana Hopper. He accounted for 28 pressures and 7 sacks from the interior last season. Of those 3 guys I mentioned with over 100 snaps a season ago, the line is anchored by the ends. We've got Thomas Davis and Sean Collins. How did that unit look in the spring?
Well, first and foremost, it looked different because, again, it was a three-man front for the past 10 or 11 seasons, and DJ went with a four-man front. Now, the first thing that you run into there, and we talked about this a little bit before we came on the air, when you're running a three-man front, you've got 6 nose tackles. That's fantastic depth. You're loving that. The minute you want to go put 2 guys down in between the tackles, now you've barely got a 3 deep, and that assumes everybody can run it. So, that was the first thing that you noticed right away was we're a little thin just in terms of total numbers. We also suffered a little bit of attrition at the end of spring ball. 3 of those guys left. So, you're down to like 4 players that were seeing regular snaps in spring ball. They have signed 3 defensive tackle, I would say, body types to come back in that will be here next month. So, there's the first thing you've got to deal with is, do you have the depth and the talent that you need to be able to do what you need to do, in those, 3 technique defensive tackles. At defensive end, there's a little more cushion there. You mentioned Thomas Davis and Sean Collins, who are very experienced guys here, have had great seasons last year and didn't do anything but pick up momentum into spring. They were both very disruptive in the spring game. And in fact, at one point, I wondered if they might pull them off the field just to make sure the offense got a chance to really, kind of run their stuff, to be honest with you. But, those guys I know, those guys I've seen. I understand what you're going to get from those guys. And there's a lot of, there's a lot of new depth there. There's a lot of younger depth there. I like A.J. Mebane, who's a guy that had been playing a stand-up edge rushing outside linebacker in the previous scheme. I thought he was really productive in spring. So I'm glad to see him developing into that. You had several of the new transfers that came in that flashed, that had some moments. Again, it's all about consistency, and it's all about understanding technique. And, it's a little bit different for some of our guys that are familiar with that 3-man set, because the defensive ends are going to operate off of those tackles a little bit differently when you put 4 of them in there. You're also, when you're in a traditional defensive end position versus being an outside linebacker, which one of those guys was in the old App State defense, the things you're asked to do change a little bit. So, I think everyone's, again, adapting to a new scheme, but I felt like the defense was able to play pretty fast up front. I think the key to it, and, a couple of guys that are younger players who are already here at defensive tackle, Bucci Farmer and Nigel Cooper are 2 young guys who redshirted last season, again, did their time on scout team. Farmer in particular is a really, really high energy guy. I mean, he's a guy that's going to have to pace himself to make it through a game because he is burning at, 1,000 degrees just the minute he gets on the field. And it's kind of fun to watch because he really gets the guys around him fired up too. I'm excited to see both of those guys in there. They really grew a lot during spring ball, and they were problematic in the spring game. They were in the backfield, and that's what you want to see out of those guys. And you realize that since they're both redshirt freshmen, they've got a lot of ceiling above them. There's a lot of upside there that will continue. As we move forward, I've got to see I've just got to see that we have the depth to be able to go run 65, 70, 80 snaps if you have to, especially in the middle of that line. If it's broken up front, it's broken all the way back. And that's the important thing, is you've got to make sure that that you're able to control that line of scrimmage. DJ's got the calls to do it. He's just got to make sure he's got the personnel that matches it.
Well, the Sarum lost a lot of guys who are wrecking havoc on the opposing quarterbacks in 2024. In your opinion, do we have somebody who's kind of primed to take that next leap and wreak havoc on quarterbacks here in 2025?
I think Thomas Davis and Sean Collins are kind of known commodities there. I do expect to see their numbers jump maybe a little bit more. I expect to see them bounce in terms of, the number of pressures and the number of times they're getting hands on quarterbacks. As far as some other guys, I mentioned A.J. Mebane. He's a guy that I think could really take a step forward. The rest of them, I'm going to have to see it. Because some of the reality is, they went out in the spring portal. I said they brought in 3 more defensive tackles. They also brought in 2 more defensive ends. and we haven't had a chance to see those guys on the field yet. So, probably a little premature, but, I know what Collins and Davis bring to the party, and I think that their impact will continue to improve.
Going into 2024, we were curious how the Mountaineers would replace Andrew Parker Jr. It looks like the duo of Kyle Arnholt and Brendan Harrington were more than serviceable in 2024. However, in 2025, this group will be without Harrington, who's off to Georgia Southern. That means App State will be looking for someone to join the Iron Man, Kyle Arnholt, in week 1. How did the linebackers look in the spring, and is it, anybody step up?
Well, there was some step up. Now, I think in order to address this, I got to kind of jump to the roster. You did have some linebackers depart after spring ball, and this group looks very different than it did when we walked into the start of spring camp. In terms of, Kyle Arnholt was there. He was a staple throughout spring ball and typically ran with the ones. Brayshawn Littlejohn, who came in from Missouri, came with DJ. Knows the scheme, knows the system. He was very present in that competition as well. And we also have Colton Ferris, who is a guy that was originally recruited here as a safety, probably would have been a free safety type, bigger body type, really athletic guy, has been able to kind of bulk up and build up to the point where he moved down to linebacker last year. Frankly, we weren't getting what we needed out of the linebacker group. There were some injuries in there. And Colton really did a gutsy job of stepping down into that group and having an impact last year. By the time the spring game rolled around, Colton had really kind of moved in with Kyle, and I would have put them as those quasi first team inside linebackers. But I think, there's going to have to be better depth development there. And again, spring portal, they went out and signed 3 linebackers. So haven't had a chance to see them. They came from some different levels of football, but that's a room that is very much still in a state of flux, I think. And as much as it looked solid, what we were seeing in terms of the depth chart in spring, this is another one that I would kind of rip up the page and say, okay, let me see it in August and see if anybody has managed to kind of extend themselves and maybe start challenging for some of those starting roles. But it's going to be, another group that had a lot of turnover, and I don't think the turnover's done there yet. I think you've got to figure out, because at linebacker, here's the thing. You've got 2 guys individually that have to operate somewhat together. So, sometimes it's not about finding the best 2 guys. It's about finding the best 2 guys who work together the most effectively. And, I think that that's just going to take some time to manage that and understand where that group is, especially since nearly half of it is brand new since the spring portal.
Well, we're switching defensive schemes here, and this defensive backfield will return some key starters like cornerback Ethan Johnson, safeties DJ Burks, Jordan Favors. They also return several guys who rotated in like Zaire Gamble, Elijah McCantos, and you got Miles Farmer also who were able to rotate in there. What should we expect from this defensive backfield heading into 2025?
Well, again, you mentioned a lot of familiar names, and they all, most of them factored into the spring. Miles Farmer is a guy who had an injury late in the season and was not able to participate in spring ball in terms of full contact. He was certainly very active there. But, a lot of familiar names there. Guys that have history here. They will all factor into this. Again, I think that I don't think you really can get through college football games today with just 2 guys starting at corner. There's just no way. There's too many snaps anymore. So, you have seen a lot of transfers come in on that side of the ball. Even in the spring, 2 more corners, 2 more safeties. Now, here's one of the tricky things about it. I'll focus on star as a part of this package group in the DB room. We lost a couple of guys, 2 that were factoring into the rotation pretty heavily, and I thought would be involved in terms of what they would deliver this fall. So right away, you had to replace 2 guys who had taken a fair amount of snaps in the spring. I think there are a couple of safeties that came in and, they look like safeties, but I think they're also capable of moving into that star position. Elijah McCantos really worked back and forth from star to corner. I think they were trying to figure out, where is he most valuable? I think he could play either, truthfully. And, they may have their hand forced because Starr got a little thin after spring ball ended. So, it'll be interesting to watch that to see who mixes into that group. I think at least two of the guys that are newer in the program will wind up shifting into that Starr position. But it's really just a matter of who's going to go out there and show the consistency. Again, DJ would probably like to be able to send some blitz pressure out of that linebacker group. Well, if he's going to do that, that's going to require him to play some man coverage. Who can hold up? When you're out there on the corner and you're split 20 yards wide, who can hold that ground down and give the pass rush enough time to get to the quarterback? And I thought that for me, and I've watched Ethan play for 4 years now, or going on 4 years. I thought this was the best spring I've seen from Ethan Johnson yet. He was very tough in coverage, very physical. Showed his knowledge and his experience, his ability to maintain his leverage is really good. I think that other corner spot is a little more of an open competition. We did have a cornerback who was a returning sophomore who left in the portal after spring ball. You guys referenced in your note Christian Conyer from Coastal Carolina. He came with the new secondary coach who's running both safeties and corners back there. I think Christian, he had a pick in the spring game, and I think he's probably a front runner for that time. But again, it's all going to be about competition, and it's all going to be about who can continually hold those edges down, and the safeties have to be great communicators. Just like the center is the guy calling the offensive line signals. Those safeties are telling everybody in front of them, okay, here's where we are, here's where we need to be. They're lining people up. And that was the biggest thing I heard in spring ball. It wasn't about techniques or all these other things. It was about talking and using your voice to make sure that everyone else knows where they need to be and what we're looking at. So, I'm looking to see who's able to absorb the scheme mentally as much as the things they do physically.
So, David, we've kind of gone through a whole bunch on the offense and defense of a lot of change, but this position group, there's a lot of guys that are returning that we talked about. Who's like the leader in this room? And whether that's a cornerback and the DBs and a safety, and like who do you think is a leader here?
Well, the easy answer would be to say, it's a veteran like Sean Collins or Thomas Davis, both of whom have great voices and the kind of perspective you need to be leaders. But, again, the dynamics are brand new. I'm going to keep going back to this. We have over 50 new players entering this program. So, the guys who have been here for a while and have accomplished things, these new guys don't understand that. They don't recognize that in the same way. So, I think that the first thing you have to do from a player perspective, and this has always been very much a player-led culture, you have to show it on the practice field. Who were the guys in spring ball that showed the nonstop effort, that supported their teammates, that took accountability on themselves and also held others accountable. Leaders tend to show themselves. I don't think people are directed to them. They have to make the decision they're going to follow them on their own. So it will be interesting to watch that because you've got to sell a lot of guys on that haven't seen you before on who you are and how you go about your business. So we'll see who develops as that voice. I would tend to go Thomas or Sean because I think they've earned that, and I think they demonstrate leadership qualities the right ways. But you never know who's gonna be vocal. You mentioned Andrew Parker, who was a linebacker here. Andrew over time really established himself as one of the voices there, even though he transferred in from somewhere else. And I think that's the real trick to this whole thing is with the transfer culture that exists in college sports right now. The options of a 4-year guy being a 4-year guy in the same place just become less and less over time. So, it's going to be how well will the newer players on this roster adapt to maybe some of the more established voices here.
All right, David, if you had to pick a defensive player to kind of have a breakout season in 2025, who might that be?
Well, I'm not positive that I know who it will be. I know where it needs to come from. We need to be better at linebacker this year. Now, whether that's Kyle Arnhold, whether that's Colton Ferris, whether it's Brayshawn Littlejohn, or whether it's one of these two or three new guys that haven't even been on the field here yet, the linebacker play has to improve this year, especially relative to stopping the running game. We just had fits last year trying to figure out how to get guys lined up, have them in the right spots, being decisive enough. It's, frankly, it's probably one of the reasons you saw some turnover in the linebacker room after spring ball. And it's just one of those things where you're going to have to see who adapts to what DJ wants. But of course, since that is DJ's, position of expertise, he's personally coaching that group. I would expect that part of the defense is going to be explained to them very well. Who can come in and grasp that opportunity? But we've got to be better in that second level of the defense than we were last year.
How are the special teams looking heading into the season? Do you have any concerns there?
Well, I think there's always going to be some thought when you've got the most accurate field goal kicker in the history of your program gone. And that's where we are. Michael Hughes left the program. He's working on chasing his NFL dreams right now. Certainly wish him the best of luck. But he had become very automatic over the last couple of seasons in particular here, and he also handled kickoffs. We do have a true freshman kicker who will be arriving next month, who comes with great credentials, but he's a true freshman kicker. So we'll have to see how his competition goes with the kickers that were already here on the roster. You also have a punter coming in. He's coming from Marshall, so certainly we're familiar with Marshall. He was also at Texas with the new special teams coordinator here. So a little bit of personal history there. We have an Australian kicker, which it seems like that's everybody now. The Australians have come in and have taken over punting in college football now. Who's also back for his second season, and Mitchell really made some improvements. I saw a lot more consistency from him in spring ball. So I think there will be some good competition there. But that place kicking spot is just so critical. As long as you are producing points somehow, it's very important, and that's a lot of weight to put on a true freshman. But we're gonna see what he's able to bring to the party here. And certainly some big shoes that he'll have to fill there.
Now that spring practice is over, which position group or groups do you think is the most concerning heading into 2025?
Well, listen, I'm always going to default to the line of scrimmage. Look, the game has changed 1,000 different ways. You can spread the receivers out. You can run pick plays. You can do all sorts of stuff. The game is still won within about 15 to 20 square feet between the biggest guys on the field. Offensive line, we talked about a little bit. There's a lot of transition there. I did see some opportunities for improvement there in spring ball, and again, they just need to develop continuity and chemistry there. Defensive line-wise, I think maybe my greater concern right now is just the sheer numbers of it. Do we have enough defensive tackles to get through a season, 12, 13, 14 games, 60, 70, 80 snaps a game? That's a lot to ask, and that's a really physically demanding position in there. You've got to handle some double teams. You got the biggest, meanest guys on the other side coming at you snap after snap. It's just going to be a matter of how well they're able to hold up, and we have some younger guys in there as well. And I'm really excited about their upside, but they're still younger guys. So, I think the line of scrimmage either side is where I would probably focus most of my attention there.
Well, in today's age of NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal, how has it changed App State's recruiting philosophy? Do you see them, going after more D2 guys, JUCO guys transferring down from the D1, or really pursuing the high school circuit a little bit more?
Well, I think we're, I don't know, this is my opinion. I think where we find ourselves right now is kind of in an area where you're balancing. You're not thinking about the transfer portal in raw numbers or a recruiting class size. It's more about roster management now. I've got 85 spots. Now we'll see where that's going to go. Is it 90s, at 95s, at 105? I don't know. Well, we'll see where that ends up. But, I think it's more about where do we anticipate we're going to need the help? How many guys do we have in that position room right now? It's really more of an NFL approach. And again, this is where Dow Loggins' history maybe plays to his advantage because he's used to thinking about this a little bit differently than maybe we thought about it at the college level. Historically, we thought about recruiting classes. And if you had a 20-man recruiting class, that was actually a small class. Typically, you're pushing up 23, 24, 25. App State hasn't signed 20 guys in a recruiting class in 4 years now because you're reserving spots, anticipating that you're going to need guys out of the portal. So, I think a lot of your question really is, where is the roster limit going to be? Where are they going to put that? And here's the dirty little secret of this whole thing, especially for those of us at the G5 level. Even if the limit goes to 105, can you afford 105 scholarships? Not everybody's going to be able to answer yes to that question. So where can you go with it? What do you do with it? And how do you make it meaningful? Or do you stick at 85 and try to send your reserves over to the NIL pool instead? I think those are all questions that have to be asked. But, in terms of where I think this staff, and I've only got literally 6 months with observing them to offer this, to you. As I'm looking at where they split up, bringing guys out of the portal, very high out of the P5 realm. And again, that makes sense because that's where Dow Loggins was coming from. That's where some of the other coaches came from. We do have 7 guys that came from either South Carolina or Arkansas. Dow's going to go where he knows the personnel. He already knows the character. He knows that they understand what he's trying to do. It makes sense that you're doing that. Will it continue that way? I can't say that. But, as I look at the number of transfers that came in, the most significant chunk of them did come out of a power form realm. But there's also a blend. There's some FCS guys in there. There are some other G5 guys in there. There's a JUCO here or there. There's a D2 guy here or there. I don't think there's one formula to it anymore. You have to go into that marketplace, see what's available to you, figure out what you can afford because the NIL is just an inevitable portion of that. And you have to balance it out with what's best for you. I do think the one thing that will be different, hopefully, moving forward, there's annual portal transactions that take place. And, if you lose 15, 16 guys, well, that's just kind of normal course of business now. Then there's we changed over coaching staffs. And you guys mentioned Charles Huff earlier. When you guys start talking with somebody from Marshall and somebody from Southern Miss and doing this series, you're going to get that perspective from 180 degrees in the other direction because almost half the roster at Marshall's in Hattiesburg now. When you change over the coaching staff, I think there's going to be an even more exceptional amount of turnover, and we saw that here at App State. Hopefully, moving forward as a coaching staff is kind of established and solidifies themselves, those numbers drop back down so that you're going into the transfer portal looking for, a dozen to 18 guys instead of 35 guys. And, we'll just have to kind of see how that transition manages itself as we move forward. But, in today's world, it's just hard to predict how the future is going to look there.
With the seems like the P4s often, are trying to fill with, through the portal or do their shopping through the portal, so to speak. Have you seen, or do you think that's going to lead to App State perhaps getting access to a higher level of recruit maybe than they have in the past?
Are you talking about a high school recruit?
High school recruit, yeah.
I've kind of theorized on that a little bit, and I thought that is what I would see maybe a little more often. I don't know that we've seen it. I don't know if there's been enough time that's gone past to draw a conclusion on that one way or the other. But I will say this. I think one thing that's going to impact it significantly is that roster limit. If they go to 105, and of course, let's say, at least a majority of the Power 4 teams will be able to accommodate that 105 scholarships, that's going to make it even more difficult to get that higher level recruit, in my opinion, because they can take those guys and stash them away. It's kind of interesting. I mean, one of the things I think that's gotten lost for college football fans at this point is there was a time when we wouldn't have necessarily expected a true freshman to come in and have any kind of impact on the field. They would come in, they would do their year of scout team, they'd probably do some special team stuff in year 2, and it might be year 3 that you actually start seeing them have a tangible impact on the field. We've kind of lost that thinking because, one, the players don't stick around long enough for that to happen. If I'm not on the field in a couple of years, I hit the portal. And, 2, because we're bringing in portal talent more often, we don't allow for that development of those younger guys to occur. It makes me wonder, as you go to these 105 scholarship limits, are you going to start seeing a little more patience by everybody where I take that quarterback, I work with him for a couple of seasons, and then by his 3rd season, he's in the mix to compete for a starting job. I don't know how that's going to go, but I just feel like, I hate to sound sour grapes about it, but, when you're in the G5 realm, it's hard not to feel this way sometimes. I feel like the roster limit thing is only going to benefit the Power Fours that much more. I think what's going to happen is that the G5 realm is really going to have to do a great job of taking the players that are still available at this level and then developing them to the fullest. But what I hope really happens out of it is that maybe players will start being a little more patient and giving themselves time in one destination to max out whatever they can become there. Of course, the stinger to that, if you're at the G5 level, is we bring them in, we build them up, we develop them, and then boom, here they go after year 3, and they're headed out to the Power 4 programs as well. I guess you can shout at the rain all you want to about that. The programs that are going to enjoy the most success are the ones that adjust to the changing landscape and do the best that they can with it from an NIL perspective and a talent development perspective. Because when the landscape's changing, you got 2 choices. You can adapt to it or you can be consumed by it. And, it is a resource war. And, the G5 programs that are able to compel NIL participation from among their fan base the most effectively are going to sit on top of that layer of college football. And, I guess you can fight it all you want to, but, it's here right now. And even the guardrails they're talking about putting in, I still feel like are just going to benefit the power level more than it is where we are in the G5 world.
Well, we've got a lot of unknowns heading into summer camp and the fall here. But as of mid-May, what do you think the main strength of this 2025 team will be?
Well, wash, rinse, repeat. I hate to keep, stiff arming you guys on this question, but I don't know because I'm not sure that I've seen this team in its entirety yet. I'll tell you what it needs to be, in my opinion, though. It needs to be unity, and it needs to be a collectiveness of participation and effectiveness. I'm not sure that I see a superhero about to walk out and carry this team on either side of the ball. Whatever they achieve, they're going to achieve together. They're going to have to force the chemistry, even to the point where these 40, 50 new guys have come in, many of whom won't arrive until the next 2 weeks, are going to have to decide we're in this together, and whatever we're going to achieve is going to happen together. So the unity of that. The messaging from the coaching staff, the ability to build that continuity within position rooms and then within units on either side of the ball is going to be critical. And people are going to have to accept some roles. You've got to backfill a lot of very important special teams spots here. Guys are going to have to be willing to take it down the field on kickoff coverage. You're going to have to be willing to go block for that punt returner. That kind of thing's going to have to develop, and it's all got to develop over summer with a lot of new people in the mix. So, this team is going to go as far as this team collectively allows itself to go, and that's really what I'm looking for when they come back in from OTAs this summer and they head into August camp. Do I feel that kind of chemistry? I think that's going to be the most important thing.
Well, given all this change, what does success look like for the Mountaineers in 2025?
Well, I guess I could spin around a lot of different stuff, but there's really just no getting around the expectations of the culture here at App State. Championships are the expectation. Competing for championships is the expectation. They want to play in a Sun Belt championship game. They want to play in the best bowl game possible. They want to threaten for however long it still exists, that one G5 spot in the playoff structure. I don't think that will ever change, and anything short of that is something that probably is looked upon disappointedly. And I think that won't change from this fan base, and I don't think Dow Loggins didn't come here to rebuild. He came here to continue the ongoing history of championships here. And that's why I think you've seen them take the portal approach they've taken. They've been aggressive in going out and acquiring talent. He's not here to win in 2026. He's here to win in 2025. So, I think they are here to win the games, and anything short of that will not be meeting the goals or the standards of the program as it exists.
Well, David, we've covered a lot of ground. We've talked NIL, we've talked offense, defense, different coaching staff. Is there anything that you would like to share or think that we should know about this 2025 App State football team?
Well, I think we touched on this really early in the conversation. It's a team that's really going to change and maybe change in some drastic ways, even from week to week. You can't enter into this much newness from the coaching staff side to the roster side to the schematic side, offensively, defensively. They're going to grow and they're going to change and they're going to look differently even from week to week. So, being able to recognize the improvement where and when it occurs is going to be important. Also, being able to recognize where the vulnerabilities are and how you're going to address those is going to be critical as well. So, I think it's going to be a really interesting season, because I think as you go from week to week, it's going to be difficult to predict what this team looks like and how much growth and how quickly it can occur. But, I think that also makes it kind of exciting, because I think you're starting from a spot where there's going to be a lot of upside growth potential every week. And that's what you're going to want to watch for as a fan base.
Well, David, thank you for taking some time out of your day to spend with us and share your knowledge and insight into App State football. We greatly appreciate it.
Always great being with you guys. Hope the rest of your series goes well.
If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. Until the next time, we are the G55.